Let's make my dad laugh today.
I'll work on my comedic timing.
All right. Well, now that we got that old business out of the way, we wanted to talk a little bit of classic wrestling because we've really only discussed modern AEW and WWE recently, or since the show started. We're on episode 10 now. Oh, I guess that's a milestone, huh? 10 episodes. I never thought we'd be on the air this long. but so I asked the boys here. I asked Robert and Vlad to make their top 5 in-ring workers. Since we're Smarks, we're gonna talk just about their in-ring work. And I have a little bit of a graphic here for each of you that you guys have sent me. Let's see who comes up first. We got Vlad. Here's Vlad's
Oh, wow.
top 5 in-ring workers of all time. He started with. You want to go through it, Vlad? Let's see.
Oh, sure. I'll start, I guess, with. Well, 5 obviously is somewhat controversial, but I'm just looking at his wrestling ability, not what he did with his personal life. This is just his in-ring work. I don't think anyone will deny that Chris Benoit, if you watched him in WCW and then later in WWFE, is one of the great in-ring wrestlers of all time. I mean, he was phenomenal. Right?
Since we're on the topic, side topic, since Cornette does this a lot, it goes off on side issues, something that comes up. What do you guys think of him getting erased completely from the WWE catalog? Is that too controversial? Do you not want to broach that subject?
I think it's understandable. Like,
yeah,
given the circumstances that happened, it makes complete sense.
Well, it ruins the show. Like, if you're gonna go back and watch all the episodes of WWE on what is it, Peacock, it doesn't make much sense now for certain parts. If I honestly I don't know how it looks. I can't imagine how it would look. It doesn't make any sense to take away the guy who wins the world title at WrestleMania and all the angles and all the promos they cut.
True. It's probably like awkward to try to watch that back and have that part missing.
But what about other art? Sorry to interrupt you, Robert, but what about other art? What if it was a movie? What if some guy, was an actor and he did something terrible? Should we go back and edit the movie now and erase him from the DVD and stuff like that? I mean, I know I realize what he did was wrong.
I see what you're saying, but there's another thing you have to factor into this is there's like WWE has like sponsors, right? There's there's like partnerships that.
Sure.
But it's not like he's on the new episodes.
Okay, I get it. But if you don't know behind the scenes, like if they push WWE to do that, if they're paying WWE money to a substantial amount of money to, do whatever they tell them to do, then you kind of have to take that into account too. So it's not just the art, I do see what you're saying, but I also think I put that as a factor too. Like that could be a reason why they did it.
What about you, Vlad? Are you okay with this? Do you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Robert. I mean, I think they're a public company. They have shareholders. It's a sticky situation. The guy he killed his family. I don't know, man. It's tough. It's a tough situation. I mean, as like I said, great wrestler, but man, he did some heinous stuff there. So, I mean, you can't I could understand why Peacock might not want him, on anything that they run. So, or like NBC, Peacock, whatever, like they might not want him on there. So I kind of understand that. So I see what you're saying, Kalen, but I'm also understanding that there's a bigger picture situation here.
So it's just me. I mean, look.
No. Yeah. I guess in a sense, yes.
It's 2-1. It's 2-1 here. Yeah, 2-1.
Well, yeah.
Well, look, if I were to remove him from Peacock, it wouldn't be because of what he did to his family. It would be because all of his matches were boring. Oh,
Mid.
no, he was
They weren't mid. They were great. But
it was a great he was a great worker. Everything looked spot on, but just not really my favorite style of match. A lot of mat wrestling, right, Vlad? A lot of grappling and stuff like this. Looks great.
I think it depended on the opponent. I mean, if he had the right type of opponent, it could be kind of magical. Like matches with him and who was number, I think 4 on my list is Eddie Guerrero. I mean, when they had matches together, their styles complemented each other because Guerrero was a little bit high flying, and like you said, Benoit was more mat based. But both were really, really, really good, together. But not just Eddie. He had great matches with a lot of people, with Jericho and I mean, even in WCW, he had great matches with a whole bunch of different guys, So
He had a 7-match series with Booker T that I remember that rivaled the 7-match series that the Young Bucks had with the Lucha Brothers.
I mean, I think I'm not going to even comment on that. I'm going to skip that. But I do remember the 7-match, the best of 7 match with Booker T. Yeah, that's just an example of just his great in-ring ability and his great in-ring work and things like that. But, I'll just go on. I don't want to spend all the time on Benoit. Eddie Guerrero, another one that kind of, died too young, but what a great wrestler, what a tremendous, and then after he left WCW, what a tremendous character, which we all didn't really get to see in WCW. I mean, we knew that he was a great worker. We saw all his matches with Rey Mysterio and Juventud, and like I said, Benoit, and all those guys that he had great matches with. He had matches with everyone that you could think of. But then you could see some of his personality come out because they were, he had it. He was like a total package wrestler.
Yeah,
Kurt
interesting
Angle,
that he could still do all that stuff when he got all buff too. He got all jacked off the steroids, and still it didn't affect his work at all. He could still do everything, but maybe he was pushing himself too hard. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I gotta agree with you.
He was a great compliment, like of great in-ring work, and then the development of the character, which became really impressive, especially his heel turns later on and stuff like that. It was just great work for him. Kurt Angle, I think that one speaks for itself. The guy is amazing. I mean, he had great matches with everyone. I don't think I've ever really seen a bad Kurt Angle match. I can't think of one. Even in his TNA work, I saw a lot of his TNA stuff when I came back to wrestling in 2010. I mean, he had great matches with AJ, great matches with Jeff Jarrett, great matches with Ken Anderson. I mean, you got great matches out of everyone, So I mean,
Bobby Roode, yeah, no, I agree. I gotta agree with Kurt Angle, definitely top notch. Top notch.
Kurt Angle is, I mean, I'm not even mentioning all the stuff, the great matches that he's had with like WWE guys, Triple H and whoever, Jericho and The Rock and whoever else. He's had matches with everyone, and he's a tremendous. Number 2, Shawn Michaels. I mean, I think that also speaks for itself. I may not like him personally, but man, there was a stretch in the 90s where I think it's some of the stuff speaks for itself. And then when he came back in 2002, he still continued to put on great matches as well. I mean, he's had great matches with everyone. The ladder matches, the casket matches, the first Hell in a Cell match, but just overall any match really. I mean, it doesn't have to be that. I mean, we all know his WrestleMania matches with The Undertaker are some of things of legend at this point.
Oh yeah.
Speaks for itself that he's one of the great in-ring workers of all time, and he has like that flashy style. His style is more flashy. It's more, not that he can do like mat wrestling. He can do it, but I think he prefers to do a lot of moves, if you will. And number 1, I don't think this one's controversial. I think this one I think is also one that speaks for itself. I think Bret Hart, when I was growing up, when I watched Bret Hart, he made things look real. And that's what I kind of liked about Bret. Like, his stuff looked real. The stuff that he was involved with looked real. And I mean, he's had so many classic matches. I mean, just on top of my head, matches with Stone Cold at WrestleMania, Piper, Kurt Hennig, the Bulldog,
Owen Hart,
Owen at WrestleMania 10. I mean, just so much great matches. He could have a great match pretty much with anybody, and he's had it. I mean, that's another one I've never really seen a bad Bret Hart match, unless you want to count that stuff, the thing that he had with Vince in 2010. But I don't really count that. I don't really count that because that was not really a match.
It was a good feud, though. I like that feud.
It was a good feud, but the match itself, I mean, that wasn't really Bret Hart anymore at that point. But I'm talking about Bret Hart from 90 to 99 until he basically retired. You know, that guy was one of the great workers of all time. If we're talking about just in-ring ability, and and then in '97 when he turned heel, he had that whole character thing that also came out a bit. I mean, that's one of his criticisms, that he's kind of dry as a character, but I think it kind of came up and he became a really, really great heel for a long stretch, and it was just working. He had a lot of material to work with, and it was great. So Bret Hart is one of my favorite workers of all time, just because of what he made you feel in the ring, and just the realism in his work. He made you think, as a kid for sure, this was some stiff stuff. This is some good stuff right here.
I think you're gonna find Robert's list kind of interesting.
I am prepared. I know Brian has a different thinking on wrestling than I do, so I am prepared for his list to be quite different than mine. I don't know if he'll even have any similarities in the top five, so I am curious if there'll be even one. But if I'm expecting it to be quite different, and we'll have a lot to discuss probably once I see it.
All right, well, let's check it out. Here's the big reveal. Here we go. Okay. Here's Roberts, in no particular order. He couldn't give an order.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I said it's interesting, because it's almost basically what you got.
Yeah, because all these guys I thought about putting in too, like Danielson and AJ. I mean, they were right probably below some of those guys, just slightly, but it's all debatable, it's all subjective. So Danielson and AJ for sure can be on.
Well, hold on, in case someone's listening to the podcast, not watching us on YouTube, because we're on Castbox and other platforms as well.
Wow.
We gotta go. We gotta say it in audio form. Robert, you want to go through your list?
Sure.
It's a little similar to Vlad's, but a little different also. Go.
Actually, it's funny because I saw Eddie Guerrero's name on Vlad's list, and Kayhan, I almost put Eddie Guerrero on here.
I know.
You saw
it's a tough list to make. Just five guys.
Yeah. My last spot was I was debating between Kurt Angle or Eddie Guerrero. It was a very tough call, but ultimately I went with Kurt Angle. So, all right, I'll start off with Kurt Angle. I mean, let's see what he's done. So, right off the bat, he won a gold medal in wrestling with a broken freaking neck. So he brought that. It's true. It's damn true. It's damn true. So he brought this sense of legitimacy with him, that he could actually wrestle for real.
That's true.
But besides that, because there are other legit good wrestlers in the business, but he was really good in his ring work as well. So
yeah.
He brought that intensity, no pun intended. He brought that in all his matches.
The three eyes.
The three eyes, that was one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just had a lot of memorable matches to me. His his character, his like persona too. Like I think in the first few years and when he was in WWE, maybe I didn't appreciate it as much until he was not there anymore. Then I realized just how good his character was. But I always enjoyed his matches, so he was awesome. All right, and let's see, can you pull up the okay. AJ Styles. Okay, so I did not really watch TNA. So I probably missed out on a lot of his prime when he was still there.
Yeah.
Um, but I know I know he when he showed up to WWE, he was coming off of New Japan, I believe. And I've heard his name a lot. I've heard that he was awesome. So when he showed up, I was like, oh, okay, I get to see what he was made of. And boy, oh boy, did he live up to the hype. He had like, I, what year did he show up? I think it was like 2015 in WWE. He had like
The
Yeah,
Royal
something like that.
Rumble.
It was the Royal Rumble.
yeah, Royal Rumble. He had a stretch of like 2 or 3 years where he had amazing match after amazing match. Like I was looking forward to seeing every match he was part of because he was that good. And
Mm.
so I was glad he, finally showed up to WWE. I should have watched him when he was in TNA. Well, I should have watched TNA, period. But I'm glad he eventually made the move and I got to see what he was capable of. Let's see, Shawn Michaels. Well, basically for a lot of the same reasons that Vlad already said. Um, he was my first, as a kid, he was my first, I think, favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
Um, I liked his, flashy style, but he was like his ring work was really good. Um, Man, there's a lot of great memories. Like Vlad already mentioned his matches with The Undertaker. I really loved his match with Kurt Angle too in WrestleMania. I want to say
Yeah.
22. I think it was 22. That was great. Um, and also the one with Bret Hart too. The WrestleMania was it 10 or 11? I forget.
12.
12. Okay.
12. Yeah.
So in those particular matches, like the one against Bret Hart and the one against Kurt Angle, people, talk about Shawn Michaels like that as this flashy um, ring worker, but he could do mat work really well. He
Yeah.
showed that he could actually hang with them in terms of mat work. So yeah, he pretty much could do it all. So yeah, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Bret Hart, well, he called himself the excellence of execution. I can't argue that. He really was. So
Definitely.
that guy was the man. I did say when Shawn Michaels was my first like favorite wrestler. They were both kind of like hot around the same time.
Yeah.
Uh, so I was more of a Shawn Michaels guy, but I always appreciated Bret Hart. Like he always brought it. He was amazing. Um, Brian Danielson. Well,
Yeah, that's your last guy.
he showed up to WWE as Daniel Bryan. Um, I when he first came on to WWE, he came on as part of the Nexus, if I remember correctly, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, he
that's
was in
right.
NXT. Yeah.
Yeah, he came out of NXT and was part of that Nexus group. So
Yeah.
at the very beginning, he had a different style. He was, at least how I remember it, he was the guy that he will pull off submissions from out of nowhere, like just well, not RKO, but just submission after submission, submission. He made like 100 different submission attempts in a match, and that made him look really, really dangerous at the time because like you never knew what he was gonna do. I kind of wished he kept that style because like that made him seem more unpredictable. Um, eventually, he stopped that and went more into like a striking style, which is still entertaining. But yeah, I've always enjoyed his matches as well, even though I would have preferred him to stick with that original style that I remember him as when he first came on it as part of the Nexus. But yeah, he's great. And his run in 2013 when he kept getting called by the authority as a B plus player, and the crowd support behind him, that was an awesome run towards the WrestleMania match. I always remember
Yes,
that.
definitely a great WrestleMania 30. So
Yeah.
over. Can't
And
argue.
I think he's remained consistently great for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
He's maintained a very high level for I don't know how many years now, but it's been a
Even
long
till now.
like, yeah, even till
Yep.
now, he
Yep. I agree.
remains like top tier. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, he's not like Jericho, who's like completely fell off. Which,
Well, to be fair, he is a lot younger than Jericho, but
true.
yeah, well, still, Jericho just seems like he doesn't even care. Vlad was telling me that he almost put Jericho on his list. Like he almost made
I
the
don't-
top 5, and I was like, ugh, come on.
I wouldn't argue that.
I think if you go back at Jericho's work, especially in WWE, not even in WCW, but specifically in WWE, he was also involved in a lot of. He was the workhorse of that company.
I
for a long
agree.
time.
I agree. I completely agree. He was great at that point. But when I was trying to tell you guys what the qualifications are for making this list,
I put him, that's why I put him out. Well, that's not the only reason I put him out. I actually think the 5 guys I mentioned, I actually do consider slightly above him as far as in-ring workers, but he's not that far off. Like, he's right
well,
there.
you're going
He's
with the
below,
best.
slightly below.
You're going with the best of what he did. I was trying to say go with overall their career. You know, like if someone had 20 good years, that's better. That's better than someone who had like 3 or 4 good years. You know what I mean? So.
Well, didn't he have 20 good years?
Yeah, but he completely ruined it at the end here. Like it's like a boxer starting his career 28-0, and then he like loses 20 matches in a row. Sorry, you're not one of the best anymore. You know, you ruined it.
So did Ric Flair ruin his career?
Yes, Ric Flair is on my list. I was actually going to mention that no way, not anywhere near the top of my list either. And I don't like the figure 4. I think the figure 4 is a ridiculous move that no one ever tapped out from.
So even though everybody pretty much says that Ric Flair in his prime is probably one of the great
he was, but this
time.
is like the Jericho argument. Like, at a time he was really good for a time.
The only reason I'm not putting Flair in is because I didn't really see him in those years when he was the best. So that's the only reason I wouldn't put him in my top 5. Not because he's not, but just because I didn't see enough of his work in NWA and then later in WWF in like the early 90s and then back in WCW again. So that's the only reason I'm not putting in.
Same here.
But I think if I even if I look at his later stuff, like I still would say Ric Flair is for sure one of the great workers of all time. I don't even think anybody would debate that.
I mean, yes, he was. I mean, look, a lot of this list also is just what we've seen. Because I gotta admit, although I don't claim to be a wrestling expert, but what I've seen is 1997 and on.
Right.
And then I've seen a lot of the 80s, like WWF videos, like major shows, like pay-per-views, and I didn't see a lot of the territory stuff, very sparsely. Right. So I'm sure there's like Jerry the King Lawler, someone that a lot of people would probably put on a list like this, but I just didn't see enough. So I'm just going off of what I've seen, which is kind of since the 90s. Although I would consider putting Flair in there because I've seen enough of him, but I think I gotta say that his later career in the 90s where like literally nobody tapped out to the figure 4. I just can't.
I don't know. I think we missed his prime years. I think his prime years were from like 80 to like maybe 1991-ish. So I think the stuff that once we started watching, like when I started watching was like 95, 96. He was already like in his 40s at that point. So, or in his mid 40s. So he was already past the peak that he was in when he was considered the best. I don't think he was already the best by 95, 96 at that point.
It's like when I started watching NBA, Larry Bird was about to retire. When I've heard so much about how awesome he was in the 80s.
Right.
I can't put him as one of my the best basketball players that's ever played, because I never watched him in his prime. But that's another discussion.
A lot of these type of discussions are what people watched when they were young, and so like Jim Cornette will probably say somebody from like the 70s or the 60s, but really one of the best workers probably should be someone from the 1920s when people actually believed wrestling was real, because their in-ring work was so good that they fooled everybody, so.
Well, I don't know. In the 20s, I think they were actually sort of just like on the mat for like 2 hours.
Like Chris Benoit was the best worker.
Well, yeah, even Benoit would have trouble being in the ring for 2 hours, grappling for 2 hours.
All right, well, I guess it's my turn. Here's my list.
Four of your names are the same as mine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It's very interesting that a lot of us ended up with the same.
So
the same guys.
Bret Hart, Kurt Angle, and Shawn Michaels are all three of ours.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Shawn.
Can you? Yes. No. I'll let you go first. Actually, let you talk first.
What can I? What'd you say?
I was going to say, can you explain the rationale behind the Undertaker? As far as what was the thinking as far as?
All right, I'll get there.
Putting him on the list.
Well, okay. I'll start with my number 5 for our podcast listeners. My number 5 was Shawn Michaels, which was on both your guys' list. Bumped around like crazy, made everybody look great, whoever was in the ring with him. So, super kick, fucking looked awesome. Charisma up the ass. So definitely on my list. AJ Styles, number 4. I didn't see TNA when I was younger. I quit on wrestling at that point. If I knew there was something like TNA going on, I might have tried to watch it, but it was hard because all the early shows were pay-per-views. And at one point, I found a website that had all of them, and I went through every single one. Literally, like I spent like a year watching everything from early TNA, and every week was a pay-per-view, so they had to literally make it so good that people had to buy the next show. So they would pull out all the stops every single week, and that
was before they got a TV deal, right? Before they got a TV deal.
And that first week, if anybody wants to go see that first match where AJ Styles won the X Division title, man, it might be the best match I've ever seen. Jesus Christ! But and he had this move, the spiral tap, which I don't think Robert saw much of. But when he was younger in TNA, he used to do this like flip. Like triple flip that I can't even explain off the top rope.
Brian showed it to me on video.
Yes, that was the coolest move. I don't think he could do it anymore. It looked like dangerous as hell, but smooth, fluid looks. The strikes look good. His psychology, I mean, it's good enough, but I think just the fluidity of his movements and his moves puts him in the list for me. So spot on and perfect. Who else I got? Kurt Angle, yes. The ankle lock, when he got that ankle lock on people, the whole crowd always used to get into it. Like, oh no, he's got the ankle lock on him. But man, for a guy who transitioned from a non-wrestling, he caught onto wrestling so well. Was so good. Good in the ring. Personality up the ass too, although we're not talking about that, but he was so freaking funny. The Undertaker. Okay, so that's the one thing that differed from you guys on your list. Nobody had the Undertaker. Well, I mean, I tried to take into account the body of work which was something I tried to say was a criteria for making this list. Like overall, he had so many WrestleMania matches, especially towards the end when people were trying to break the streak. The two with Shawn Michaels, the two with Triple H were such incredible 5-star matches on such a grand stage at WrestleMania that everybody wanted to see, and they were so well done, so perfectly well done. And he's kept a lot of kickouts, false finishes out of, unrealistically, like getting hit with a sledgehammer by Triple H in the Hell in a Cell at WrestleMania, and super kicked, and he still kicked out, but it still made sense because he's the Undertaker. He had the supernatural thing, which is a little funky, but he made it work, and I think, and everything else he does too, like the tombstone, the strikes, they're all solid. Yeah. But I have to say, just because he had such incredibly massive, important matches that went perfectly. So that's why he goes number 2 on my list. Like, who else had more important matches than that? I mean, the streak was probably more important than a lot of world title matches. Like, John Cena had a lot of world title matches at WrestleMania, but the streak was like the real main event. People were like, "Is he get like the Shawn Michaels retirement match?" Triple H trying it twice after him, and was there someone after that who fought him before he fought Kurt Angle, or was that the last one? The Triple H? I don't know. We got to go through the list, but I mean, I think it was great. I think he's really his persona and everything. It fit so well together with his work in the ring, so he had to make my list. And who else is on my list? The last one was Bret Hart. Yeah, I mean the strikes, the punches. Probably my favorite puncher. He did the stomp, which some people are like likening the stomp to slapping the leg. But a lot of guys used to do it back then, like Scott Hall. So he'd throw a punch and he'd stomp the floor. It made it look like real good. It made it look real good. Gave it some extra oomph. So and yes, so many incredible matches. The one with Stone Cold, the one with Owen Hart, just flawless in the ring. Some people might say he didn't have the personality, but I liked his personality too. So there we go. So there's our list. We all had 3 guys, very similar lists for all of us basically. I had some honorable mentions that I didn't. I mean, Bryan Danielson, I agree with Robert, is fantastic. Scott Hall I really liked. Eddie Guerrero too. Christian, of course, I'll give a shout out. And some of the old guys, Ricky Steamboat, Jerry Lynn, Rey Mysterio. These are some guys that I thought of as really...
Sure. Yeah, all those guys are very...
What happened to your boy, Jeff Jarrett?
Jeff Jarrett.
I thought he was your greatest.
I respect what he's done in the wrestling business.
Okay.
For what he has, for his level of ability
I was just waiting for you to say Jeff Jarrett. So I was like, what's he gonna say his name? Okay.
Well, for the record, I do think that not that Jarrett's a top 5 or even.
I think he's a really good in-ring worker too.
But I think he's also a really good in-ring worker, especially I think his early stuff is really good. Like his stuff in early WWE he was a good worker. He was a good wrestler. He could work for sure.
All right. Well, that was
I was just expecting Keon to say his name. That's all.
Oh, yeah,
I know.
that's true.
I know. Well, the list was best in-ring workers, not your favorite wrestler. If it was your top 5 favorite wrestlers, then he would be my number 1. I love that guy.
Right.
But I guess no one put Hogan on this list either. No Hogan, no Flair. Although I don't know.
Would be on my honorary members, as well as guys like Jericho, and I didn't have AJ on there, who I think is a great worker. Danielson, as somebody has said. So there's Rey Mysterio for sure. I also liked a lot of Edge's work. Especially his early stuff. I think he's a really good worker. When he was healing it up with Lita, I thought there was some good work. I mean, just match wise and character wise, he was really good at that time. So he'd be on my honor member list. I've always enjoyed he has a creative mind for some of his matches.
All right. Well, let's wrap that up. That was a nice segment, at least just to get our feet wet talking about some classic stuff.
Yes.
We'll think of more things to talk about as time goes on, but we do want to do a Dynamite review for this